Can brain stimulation boost athletic performance? In this video, we are looking at the article, Non-Invasive Brain Stimulation in Athletic Performance, a Critical Narrative Review. It was published in BMC Sports Science, Medicine and Rehabilitation, by Deng and colleagues. The topic is non-invasive brain stimulation, or NIBS. This includes techniques that can modulate brain activity without surgery and without drugs. The review discusses whether these techniques may influence sports performance, motor learning, rehabilitation, pain, fatigue, attention, decision-making, and emotional regulation. But this is not a simple story. The results are promising, but they vary. And there are major questions about safety, long-term effects, fairness, and ethics in sport. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Sports Science Insight. Here we break down sports science research into simple, practical, and evidence-based insights for athletes, coaches, students, and practitioners. Let's break it down. NIBS stands for non-invasive brain stimulation. The goal is to influence brain activity from outside the skull. No surgery, no implanted device, no pharmacological stimulant. The review discusses several techniques. One is TDCS, or transcranial direct current stimulation. This uses a weak direct electrical current to modulate cortical excitability. Another is TACS, or transcranial alternating current stimulation. This uses alternating current and may influence neural oscillations. Then there is TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, and RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. These use magnetic pulses to influence activity in targeted brain regions. In simple terms, NIBS tries to modulate brain activity without surgery or drugs. That is why it has become interesting for both rehabilitation and performance science. Sport performance does not begin in the muscle. It begins in the nervous system. Before an athlete sprints, jumps, shoots, passes, swims, or lifts, the brain has to organize the action. It must process information, select the movement, control attention, coordinate timing, regulate effort, and manage fatigue. The central nervous system helps determine how efficiently the body can execute a skill. This is why brain-based interventions are attracting attention in sports science. If the brain can be trained, stimulated, or modulated, perhaps performance-related functions can also be influenced. But the key word is perhaps. The nervous system is central to performance, but changing it safely and reliably is complicated. So the message is, sport performance is neural before it becomes muscular. This article was a critical narrative review. That means it mapped and discussed the evidence, but it did not statistically pool the data like a meta-analysis. The authors searched studies from 2003 to 2023. They included research involving athletes, healthy adults, and sport-related tasks. They looked at different forms of brain stimulation, different stimulation targets, different sports, different outcomes, and different study designs. This is important because the evidence is highly heterogeneous. Some studies showed positive results, some showed mixed results, and some showed no clear benefit. So we should not interpret this review as saying, brain stimulation works for all athletes in all sports. A better interpretation is, this review maps the evidence, but it does not provide one pooled effect size. It shows promise, but also uncertainty. One major area is motor performance. Some studies suggest that NIBS may influence strength, endurance, reaction time, coordination, and sport-specific output. For example, the review describes studies where brain stimulation was linked with improvements in endurance performance, vertical jump, reaction time, and coordination. Some trials reported positive responses in athletes or healthy participants. But the effects were not universal. In some studies, the results were mixed. In others, there was no clear improvement. This is an important point. A technique may help one type of task in one population with one protocol, but fail to help another task in another group. So we need to avoid exaggeration. The correct message is, some studies show gains in physical output, but responses vary. In sports science, context matters. And with NIBS, context matters a lot. One of the most interesting possibilities is not instant performance. It is faster learning. Many sports depend on skill acquisition. A basketball player needs shooting accuracy. A volleyball player needs timing and coordination. A golfer needs putting control. A football player needs decision-making and movement precision. And all of these skills require the brain to build, refine, and retain motor patterns. The review discusses evidence that NIBS may influence motor learning, coordination, accuracy, and retention. For example, stimulation over motor or prefrontal regions may support neuroplasticity and improve the consolidation of newly learned skills. This means the potential benefit may not be, put on stimulation and instantly perform better. The more realistic idea is, use brain stimulation to support learning, practice, and retention. So the key message is, the most interesting promise may be faster learning, not instant performance. NIBS may also have a role in rehabilitation. Traditional sports rehabilitation often focuses on the injured tissue, the tendon, the ligament, the muscle, the joint. But injury and recovery also involve the nervous system. Pain changes movement, fatigue changes motor control, fear and protective behavior can alter coordination, and the brain may reorganize after injury. That is why the review discusses NIBS as a possible tool for pain modulation, mental fatigue management, rehabilitation, and return to play. For example, stimulation of areas such as the motor cortex or prefrontal cortex has been explored in chronic pain and neurorehabilitation contexts. In sport, this may become relevant when athletes are trying to restore function after injury. But again, the evidence is not yet definitive. NIBS may support rehabilitation by targeting the nervous system, not only the injured tissue. Performance is not only physical, it is also emotional. Athletes compete under pressure. They deal with anxiety, expectation, fear of failure, fatigue, pain, distraction, and emotional stress. The review discusses the role of the prefrontal cortex in planning, executive control, and emotional regulation. Some studies suggest that stimulation over prefrontal regions may influence mood, competitive anxiety, focus, and mental fatigue. For athletes, this is important, because a small change in anxiety, attention, or perceived fatigue can affect execution under pressure. But this area also requires caution. Emotional regulation is complex, and using brain stimulation to influence mental state in sport raises ethical questions. Still, the concept is powerful. The brain may influence how athletes handle pressure. How might NIBS work? The review discusses several possible mechanisms. One is cortical excitability. Stimulation may increase or decrease how easily neurons fire in targeted brain regions. Another is neuroplasticity. NIBS may influence processes similar to long-term potentiation and long-term depression. In simple terms, it may affect how neural connections strengthen or weaken. The motor cortex is one important target because it is involved in movement control and motor learning. The prefrontal cortex is another important target because it is involved in attention, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Brain networks also matter. Athletic performance requires communication between motor, sensory, cognitive, and emotional systems. So NIBS may change how neural networks communicate and adapt. But we need to remember, mechanisms shown in laboratory settings do not always translate directly into real competition. That is why more athlete-specific research is needed. Now we reach the biggest question. Is brain stimulation a recovery tool, or could it become a form of neuro-doping? If NIBS helps an injured athlete manage pain or support rehabilitation, many people may view it as a medical tool. But if it is used to enhance performance in healthy athletes, the ethical debate changes. Sport must consider fairness, safety, autonomy, informed consent, access, regulation, and competitive integrity. If only some athletes can access brain stimulation, does that create an unfair advantage? If an athlete feels pressure to use it to keep up, is that really a free choice? And if the long-term risks are unclear, who is responsible? These are not small questions. If brain stimulation improves performance, sport must decide where the line is. So what should we take from this review? First, NIBS is promising. It may support motor learning, skill acquisition, endurance, strength, attention, decision-making, mood regulation, pain management, and rehabilitation. Second, the evidence is mixed. Different studies use different techniques, targets, doses, populations, and outcomes. Third, protocols are not standardized. We do not yet have clear sport-specific guidelines for who should use NIBS, when to use it, and how to apply it safely. Fourth, long-term safety is still unclear, especially for young athletes and repeated use. Fifth, ethics must come before adoption. The responsible future of NIBS in sport requires science, safety, and fair competition. So the bottom line is this: NIBS is promising, but sport needs science, safety, and ethics before adoption. If this video helped you, leave a like, subscribe to Sports Science Insight, and stay tuned for more evidence-based content on training, recovery, technology, and performance. And tell me in the comments, would you consider brain stimulation a rehabilitation tool, a performance enhancer, or a form of neuro-doping? See you in the next breakdown.